Hello there, Steve here in Sydney of the lay gnosis website truebluehealer.com. I'm just going to tell you some things that gives you a real handle on the group behaviour of the pseudo-skeptic movement by just telling you about some of the individuals involved in it and the kind of antics they actually get involved in. And it'll give you like a quick general cartoon picture of the whole movement and what they're actually doing and what they think about, the flavour of it, the social flavour, that sort of thing, the mental flavour, the mental capacity, that sort of thing. And the one I'm going to start with first is the simple deception of Dr. Steven Novella, an American pseudo-skeptic who goes on televisions shows, and he introduces himself as a Yale neurologist, okay? And he's an expert, and he has some authority, like pseudo-skeptics always claim. They're always claiming eminence and authority, you see. So they should be listened to very seriously, right? Well, Dr. Steven Novella is known not to have actually practiced any medicine since at least 1991. So he has essentially been unemployed for 20 years, but he still claims to be a Yale neurologist, you see. Now, how do you get to have Yale, or claim the word Yale, the Yale setting, around your name? Well, it's incredibly simple. You take a Visa card and you can rent premises, a room, for 4 hours a week at Yale University, and then once you've paid your 4 hours rent weekly for the room there at Yale University, you can claim a Yale postal address. Okay? So therefore, you can sort of claim to be a neurologist or a doctor or any kind of practitioner, and you can say, I'm a neurologist from Yale University. And that's actually what Dr. Steven Novella actually does. Now, he goes on major TV shows and he gets basically cake thrown in his face by conventional people like Dr. Oz. He goes on and he champions the cause of Big Pharma, but he puts his foot in his mouth so badly, even accidentally. Even though I'm paraphrasing him here, Dr. Steven Novella did say on the Dr. Oz show, he was warning Dr. Oz about using food as medicine, changing your diet to improve your health and your situation. He did caution Dr. Oz that Big Pharma recently has been studying food and found that it's okay, it's all right, I suppose, to advise people to take food, but it's really no substitute for drugs from Big Pharma. And Dr. Oz should be told, should be advocating this to the audience, because drugs come first. This is what Dr. Steven Novella actually said. So you can look it up. I'm not sure the video is still available, but it was hilarious to watch, and it was basically a pie fight where Steven Novella lost. My goodness, it's quite a rich experience to watch these things on the television screen. Now, another poser trying to pass himself off as some kind of eminent person, so you should listen to him. The Australian skeptics have enlisted the aid of someone calls themselves an adjunct associate professor, La Trobe University. He comes on and apparently he's an expert on vaccines or something, and you should listen to him because he's an adjunct associate professor. It's been looked up on the La Trobe University website. Precisely what does adjunct associate mean? Well, basically it does mean doesn't have a paid job here, never was employed, is not employed, doesn't really work here. So is that humorous or what? Comes on the TV posing as some kind of vaccine expert, as a La Trobe University eminent professor or something. He's anything but that. He's a nothing and a nobody. And it does sort of remind me of the little game children play with the soccer field positions such as centre forward and full back and left wing and right wing, when children say your position is left right out, that's your position, you're playing left right out. That's in fact what the adjunct associate professor title means. Left, right, out, not really in the picture, not even in the game. But pseudo-skeptics are always great pretenders, always wanting to be eminent and looked up to by other people, but they always put their foot in their mouth over and over again because of their infantile little minds. There is an Australian housewife who dares to campaign against vaccines. She actually is deeply concerned about vaccine safety, and there are reports just out, and I'll link it beneath this video, that vaccines are nowhere near as safe as media propaganda would have you believe. Mrs. Dory in New South Wales, state of, she campaigns with a website and she does public lectures, basically just talking about the many casualties of vaccines that you never ever hear about. There are quite a lot, and in fact I'll just tell you this, some vaccines have taxes on them to pay for damage suits because they injure so many people. The taxes are placed on the vaccines to pay out the damages. Massive insurances have to be taken on some of the vaccines, have to be taken out on some of the vaccines. Okay, so now Mrs. Dory in New South Wales was advocating this and saying, you know, wise up before you put your arm out for a vaccine, especially your children. Australian skeptics decided to mount a 3-year head-kicking campaign to terrorise her into silence, and they even made written death threats to her, published them. They published their name too. The leader of the skeptics, Daniel Raphael, the leader of the Australian skeptics, is in fact a mere shoe salesman claiming to be leading the squad of head-kicking people to close down the AVN, the Australian Vaccine Network, which is simply Mrs. Dory talking about the dangers of vaccines to children especially. And this is how dumb this leader of the Australian skeptics can be. He made a death threat to Mrs. Dory from his own landline telephone at home. Can you imagine anyone being that stupid? It was traced in a few hours. He's facing court charges for making death threats over a telephone service, which can bring years in jail. And worse than that, the skeptics in his little group worship him so much they egg him on to do these things. They will be facing, because they gave him an award for what he did to Mrs. Dory, they'll be facing potential jail time for conspiracy to commit a criminal act. Okay, now that's the Australian skeptics for you, and that's just typical of the skeptic mindset.
I want to go to Scotland now and Louis Sava from our studio there in Edinburgh. Louis, good evening to you.
Hi, Steve.
Well, Louis, are you a believer?
Absolutely not.
Tell us why. There's Derek, he's listening to you. Tell him why.
Yeah, I mean, you said it earlier, it's all bullshit.
Why, Louis?
Why? It basically comes down to the fact there is no God. There is no afterlife. Therefore, people like spirit mediums are making up as they go along.
Derek,
it really is as simple as that.
There's no way talking.
Hello, Louis.
Hi, Derek.
Nice to speak to you again. Louis, you know, your belief system and my belief system is totally poles apart. I believe in a God, a creator. I believe that our God, our creator, has designated an area after physical death for us people to go on because we are children of God. And that's the promise.
Okay. And can I interject though? Because I was reading Derek Akora's website today, and you said that people who suffer abuses or murders bring it on themselves. So I wonder, you know, the guy who was on just a moment ago with Parkinson's, did he choose Parkinson's before he was born then, Derek? Because that's what you kind of say on your website.
Louis, yes. This is a deep debate, I suppose. But I'm saying
this. Yes or a no, though?
Well, yes, I do believe it. Yes, because we have many lives.
Well, I find that very offensive.
It's also, to be fair, Louis, a different discussion, isn't it? The bottom line is that the reason why people like Derek can either get away or completely take advantage of what they do is because you don't know for sure, pal. You don't know for sure. You can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't touch it yet, but you still don't know.
Look, if you want to believe that there is an afterlife, that's fine. It's childish and it's infantile, and most scientists say outright there is no God, there is no afterlife.
Is heaven
the fact
childish?
The fact is we're alone in the universe.
Is heaven childish and infantile?
Is heaven childish? Yes.
Well, you're insulting the majority Christian community in this country then, aren't you?
Well, I'm very sorry. The Christian community are a cult, and I don't really mind about offending them.
Well, maybe I do, Louis.
Another spectacular failure promoted as a success, another pseudo-skeptic, is one called Louis Sava. I'll give you a little video clip of him ranting and raving, calling people idiots, they're all deluded, that sort of thing. And guess what? He's about the best the pseudo-skeptic movement can produce. You watch him ranting and raving, and people have said there's no logic or common sense to what he says anyway, and he's ranting and raving. And he's clearly clinically depressed. He runs a blog where he says everything is pointless, which is self-defeating, means everything he ever says and claims is pointless too and has no meaning. He'd be better off going to see a psychiatrist or a doctor and getting medication rather than ranting and raving at religious people, which is a sign of anxiety, fear. Okay, abject fear, deep fear, very common in young men, and seriously can lead to suicide. Now, what's the major failure that Louis Sava, S-A-V-V-A, has actually done? Well, believe it or not, being the best available for the pseudo-skeptic movement, Chris French, the famous parapsychologist who spent 30 years researching things that don't exist, specifically the paranormal and telepathy, took him under his wing and tried to show him. Louis Sava was enrolled in a PhD program. Just look what you just saw. It's unbelievable, isn't it? Louis Sava was enrolled in a PhD program and dropped out of it finally because it was pointless. He said everything was pointless he was doing there, and he couldn't find any evidence of telepathy, just like Susan Blackmore couldn't find it either. She was from the psych operation called Psychop, Fellow of Psychop. You get the play on words there? Psych operation. It's a head-kicking operation called CSI-COP, Psychop. Okay? It's a play on words from 1976, probably invented by Paul Kurtz. Head kicker from behind the scenes. Louis Sava is carrying on the noble work of the pseudo-skeptics, head-kicking everyone they can in the public domain. But most likely, most fondly, religious people and people who understand the paranormal and have been there and understand it, experience it themselves. Okay, they all need to be head-kicked. Okay, it's important we head-kick these people, is what the pseudo-skeptics always say. Now, no surprise, Louis Sava couldn't find anything and gave up. He couldn't do the PhD program. The truth is he's incompetent. He can't do maths and science. He's revealed in his blogs he can't connect thoughts properly, like most pseudo-skeptics. Okay, they have difficulty connecting thoughts because they're just too angry. Anger knocks their thinking process for six, completely out of kilter, so they're unable to logically connect thoughts. Now, last but not least, I've got the best part for you, which is a skeptic, a lady called Rebecca Watson, who joined the skeptic movement. She's got a Bachelor's of Science degree in communication, apparently. She's quite a good communicator. And she goes to skeptic conferences, and this is amusing. She actually wrote in her blog, and I've linked it below, she actually wrote in her blog that she didn't really mind too much skeptics giving her the occasional rape and death threat. That was okay. That was par for the course for the skeptic organisation. And wait for it. During all this, she had warm religious feelings. She actually says that in the first or second paragraph. She felt in a group where she belonged, a kind of home feeling, which she described as a warm religious feeling. So even the most ardent skeptics, and she certainly is one, confesses to religious motivation, seeking a religious place to be. Isn't that amazing? Absolutely amazing. So Rebecca Watson enjoying her religious feelings when she's with the skeptic group, and I imagine a lot of the men do too, she began to give them the benefits of her university education, and surprisingly it was not met with a favourable response. She started lecturing them on social skills and their lack of them, and criticising the men generally at these skeptic conferences by introducing the concept of feminism, which is really a listing of all the mistakes that men make and all the faults in men's behaviour, you see, and how they make women victims, you see. Very untactful thing to do to a bunch of angry men who are socially incompetent. And she has received thousands of death threats, threats of dismemberment, threats of rape and murder, directly to her face, in her email box, in her physical letterbox, everywhere she goes. And she just doesn't get it. She doesn't understand that a whole bunch of angry, incompetent, socially incompetent men don't like to be criticised. So I actually do fear for her safety in the future if she remains there. And she actually does say in her blog she knows a number of other skeptics, they call themselves, women who have been hounded out of the skeptic movement by these horrifying death threats, rape threats, murder threats, that sort of thing, dismemberment threats. She gets communicated to her pictures of human bodies that have been chopped up, that sort of thing. By the way, that also happened to Mrs. Dory in New South Wales, with the Australian skeptics doing the same thing to her. So skeptics as a group around the world, emotional head kickers doing their very best to injure other people emotionally. Okay? This is undeniable. The proof is in. They actually send these horrific photos from Facebook. It's all traceable to skeptic groups, you see. Now, here's the most important thing. This is a little message for you. It's about how people can be sucked in. No matter how much education you've got, you can be lied to. Apparently, in the 2-year course she did in communication, Rebecca Watson didn't learn about lying. She still believes things as they are written down are the truth, will be the truth, must be the truth, which is forgivable for her age. She hasn't been head-kicked enough yet to realise that a lot of lies are written down to trap you into a mindset which can make you into turn you into a victim of something lying in wait. And it certainly did happen to Rebecca Watson. She became victim of a hate group, and this is how she started. Not unusual. She was working in a magic shop, and she enjoyed magic tricks and all the paraphernalia and all the games and tricks involved with it, enjoyed selling it, talking to customers, that sort of thing, demonstrating magic tricks. Now, what's wrong with that? That's pretty harmless, isn't it? Well, strangely, a lot of dysfunctional men are attracted to magic tricks. That's been noticed scientifically. Okay, it's a strange fascination they have, but carry on with the story. Rebecca Watson is in the magic shop. She does a few magic gigs because she's asked to, at parties and stuff like that, and what's wrong with that? She then became, she started looking at James Randi, who's held up as an eminent magician, you see. She then heard that there's something called the James Randi Educational Foundation, JREF, you see. So she, coming from an educated background, naively believed that JREF really was an educational foundation. It's taken her quite a couple of years, 3 years or 4 years or something, to learn that the JREF is actually a hate group, head-kicking as many people as they can in the public, specifically religious people, proponents of telepathy, and most of all women. They hate women with a vengeance. Okay, that's why she receives a mountain of death threats, rape threats, murder threats, dismemberment threats. Okay, quite a few of the men in the skeptic movement there take it upon themselves to stalk her for months and years. They promise her a lifetime of pain, a lifetime of stalking, of cruel letters, cruel communications. So these pseudo-skeptics are all too often a font of cruelty and a desire to head kick other people. Now, JREF is in fact really just another Ku Klux Klan, and I'll point out to you that just with the use of words you can characterise the Ku Klux Klan as simply an educational foundation promoting critical thinking. And very wisely they do quote Darwin, don't they? The Ku Klux Klan always used to talk about social Darwinism. They quoted Darwin. They were a scientific bunch of people. But really they were a terrorist group, weren't they? Let's face it. But they could have easily referred to themselves as an educational foundation, bringing people up to speed, waking them up, you see. So that's really what James Randi's educational foundation is. It is a hate group, and its behaviour does fit the FBI profile of hate groups. Okay, verbal violence, real violence ultimately comes out of it because they radicalise each other over a period of time, and skeptics, some of them will be tipped over the edge into actual physical violence. In fact, that's been happening in Australia with the Australian Vaccine Network. Mrs. Dorey has been the victim of violence and has had to go to the police and take out an AVO against the Australian Skeptics group. Now, doesn't that say something about the worldwide skeptic movement? What do you think about that? One thing I'll say about Rebecca Watson, she is, for her age, forgivably naive. I think we're all like that at that age. And she still thinks, after all this head-kicking threats of murder, thousands of times in her email box, death threats, the whole thing, dismemberment threats, she still thinks that the skeptic organisation has admirable high ideals. She still believes that, you see. So she probably still believes in Santa Claus as well, because he might exist, you don't know. And you've got to hold your hopes out, right? So she believes, against her all the evidence, she's not an evidence-based thinker. Against all the evidence, she still believes the skeptic movement has social value and has some benefits for her, as she naively tries to teach feminist values to a whole conservatorium full of very angry men, clearly psychopathic, sociopathic, socially incompetent men. She's trying to teach them feminism, which is basically a lengthy critique of men's behaviour. Can you think of a more dangerous mix? Can you think of a more dangerous mix and a more unwise behaviour? It's like playing with gunpowder, I think. I really, really do. And I would counsel her just to leave the skeptic movement. And instead of trying to set up a skeptic alternative, a feminist skeptic alternative group, she could end up suffering at the hands of a radicalised skeptic who just goes too far for her own safety. I suggest she just quit the movement, like so many other women have. They've been hounded out, and those ladies got the message. Don't be there. Lesson number 1 is look after yourself. Don't be there. Don't associate with these people who are just trying to do your head in. Okay? Steve in Sydney. It's kind of obvious that Rebecca Watson is not entirely a logic, evidence-based thinker, and she's clearly driven by personality, natural hormones and things like that. Aren't we all? Most of us are actually illogical and irrational thinkers. We think emotionally. And she's got emotional drives too, and it would appear, at a casual observation looking at her blog, that she's in a position where she sees herself almost with some religious zeal, but certainly with a maternal zeal. That is, she wants to save a lot of these men from themselves. A lot of women do this. They marry under-functioning men, and it's a disaster because they think they can mother them and love them into being a better person, and ultimately experience indicates you cannot do this. So here we have, with her likely strong maternal drive, Rebecca Watson being drawn into the lion's den and extending her stay there, unwelcome stay, extending it by lecturing the lions in the den on feminism. Now, what do you think likely outcomes are? Just work out the probabilities. We're not talking about parapsychology anymore. We're talking about survival. What's the likelihood of a long-term survival? Just think about it. Work out the probabilities. I'll leave that thought with you, guys. One more thing can I point out that the trap that she's walked into, this Rebecca Watson, she walked into a trap of reading something that was a bait set for her. It's the word JREF, which she took literally to mean what it said, James Randi Educational Foundation. She therefore assumed that the organisation was doing just that. But George Orwell pointed out in a book called 1984 that things are often reverse titled to fool you, to trap you into believing the wrong thing, to keep you on the wrong foot so that you can fall victim to some cruel process awaiting you. Now, there's a simple solution to get around this. All over the net we can talk about JREF and never let it be written by itself ever again. We simply ask people to call it the JREF Hate group, which she would never have joined. Okay? It's a simple signpost to stop the trap being stepped into. Rebecca Watson got sucked in by her own admission. From the magic shop, she heard about JREF Educational Foundation. It couldn't occur to her. It didn't occur to her naive, youthful, thrilled mind thrilled by magic, that it could be anything but what it says. Well, it is. It's a hate group full of very hateful individuals who go all over the net and head kick people daily for their daily activities. So she's got herself in the lion's den there with thousands of them, giving her hate mail and the like, and death threats, dismemberment threats, rape threats, whatever. It raises the likelihood of it actually being carried out. So, can we save more people? Can we protect more people, future people, from stepping in the JREF trap by being naive and believing it to be what it claims to be, an educational foundation, when it's a lot more like the Ku Klux Klan hate group? The simple solution is to write about JREF all over the internet and associate it with the word hate group. The JREF hate group is the way to go to protect other people from falling into this trap. Okay? It's something you can do, people out there. Costs you nothing, and you can save a lot of people a lot of heartache for decades to come. Okay? Something you can do for your society from home, from your keyboard. Okay? Steve here in Sydney, and I'll leave you with that.